Welcome to Critical Conversations. I'm Chris Hussain.
I am Shanta Sipasar.
I'm Narmada Ramjit Singh.
And we would like to thank you all for joining us in a new year. It is 2024, and we spent a couple weeks off, engaged in, I guess, family and friends activities. Of course, it would have been the Christmas season and New Year's. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we lost, I would describe him as one of the fathers of our nation. Former Prime Minister, Mr. Bastille Pandey. And today's episode is a tribute to him and his legacy. You know, I remembered when I did the youth parliament, Chandra, and we sat next to each other, and you were telling me about your story about him, and I really felt as though I would like for you to share that with our audience.
Oh my gosh, yes, Chris. So, growing up, and I would tell my age. I was born in '96. So at that time, the two politicians I grew up watching is Mr. Bastille Pandey and Mr. Patrick Manning. And the style of politics was different than the charisma from both leaders. And, you know, they were household names, and the way we were brought up, we had love and admiration for our leaders. And I don't want to say obsession, but in 2006, it came across the news that Mr. Pandey was being released from jail. And I live in the East, and knowing that, well, he's being released, he's going to have a press conference in Piarco. Well, I wanted to go and meet Mr. Pandey.
And you were how old?
I would have been about 9 or 10
9
years
or 10,
old.
right.
Yeah. And Mr. Pandey held this press conference at, well, what is now known as Bhagwan Singh Hardware. There wasn't the hardware there as yet. And I told my mom, I said, I'm not going to school, let's go and meet Mr. Pandey. I stayed home from school that day, and I went to the press conference, and I met him, I hugged him, and that was the first time I actually met Mr. Pandey. Now, a funny thing is that, you know, when you're absent from school, your parents would have to write an excuse as to why you're absent. And my mom decided to write the next day, well, Shanta could not attend school because she was not feeling well. And when I handed it to my teacher told me, but Shanta, we saw you on TV last night.
Oh Lord.
Hugging up Mr. Pandey.
Oh my God.
But listen, growing up, I have always held interest in politics. I have followed Mr. Pandey. And another story I have, I would always remember Mr. Pandey on the platform. His famous line, my brothers and sisters. I think most politicians say that, but I specifically remember that from Mr. Pandey. And I asked my mom, I said, how much brothers and sisters Mr. Pandey has? Why are you talking to them? And, you know, my mom had to explain to me, well, you know, he's referring to his supporters, and she made it seem as if, you know, the UNC is his family. So he would refer to them as brothers and sisters. So I had a step ladder. So I would climb on this ladder.
And I remember, this is a story, guys. So when I asked, I wanted her to share this particular
This one,
right.
I have so many. And the flat top of the ladder, I would pretend that is my podium. And I will go there, and, you know, I would pretend to have, you know, a flag or something, and I would, my brothers and sisters, you know, imitate Mr. Pandey. And, you know, we do these things based off of love, admiration, and, you know, wanting to be like that person one day.
Well, of course, in a moment of bereavement, we wish his family a sincere, and we want to wish our condolences. And I know we would have put out a release expressing, but of course, and I have to say this, that the way that I did not meet Mr. Pandey, by the way. I did not get to meet him.
I met him.
I know you met him.
Yes, I was about 5. This was in 1995. He would have come to New York. This was in Shiva Mandar, the Mandar that I grew up in. And I believe it was around Indian Arrival Day, May. And I think Mr. Pandey's government was responsible for changing Arrival Day to Indian Arrival Day in 1995. So it was a momentous occasion, and he came, and he presented me with a certificate. We did a little history lesson, and it was a special moment. And also, upon his passing, there have been calls made to honor his legacy and calls made to name the airport after him. And I remember the first time I would have come to Trinidad, stepped foot on Trinidad, I would have been 3. This would have been 1993, 3 or 4, going to be 4. And I remember walking off the airplane, and you walk off the airplane into hot sun, right? Flying from New York, coming into Trinidad, hot sun. So I do think it's most deserving. He had the vision, he had the foresight to give this country the best airport in the Caribbean. And I've been to numerous airports in the Caribbean, and it's by far the best. And we have to give credit where credit is due.
I held on to this close to my heart. This is a manifesto from 2000 to 2006, and this would have been Mr. Pandey's and the UNC's plan for continuing governance. And when I look at the accomplishments of Mr. Pandey's UNC-led government, the schools, the infrastructure, and even up to this day, this country is lacking so much. And this is, it's all in here.
We speak a lot, and I know we will get into the political legacy in our upcoming interview with former minister and former MP, the very honorable Mr. Chandresh Sharma. And that's in the next segment. But one of the things that stood out to me, and one of his legacies that I think, well, of course the country, if you didn't know, you know now for sure, is his personal life, and specifically with his daughters. And I want to compliment former MP Michaela Pandey on how she would have carried herself in the public domain during this time of grief, sadness, and sorrow. And I want to thank the Pandey family for sharing, Mr. Pandey with Trinidad and Tobago, because he was not just our Prime Minister. I think he was our best Prime Minister ever that this country has ever seen.
We have truly lost a soldier, a patriot of Trinidad and Tobago, and I don't think anyone could replace that personality and that legend and his legacy,
And legend and legacy, I think we'll have a lot to discuss in the next segment. So we want you all to stay with us. Welcome back to Critical Conversations. And as promised, we are joined by the very honorable, the former Member of Parliament for Fyzabad and former Minister, Mr. Chandresh Sharma. We want to welcome you to Critical Conversations. Thank you for joining us in paying honor and tribute to the late but always great Mr. Fyzabad Pandey. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And Mr. Pandey would be very pleased to see so many young people taking charge of our program. So you must be congratulated. Mr. Pandey spent his entire life encouraging young people and to think outside of the box and to act outside. And the fact that you're hosting the show says that you have listened to Mr. Pandey. And that indeed is a tribute to Mr. Pandey's life.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Really, we accept that and we appreciate it.
It means a lot.
It means absolutely a lot to us. Now, you would have known Mr. Pandey politically, but I would assume a bit on the personal side as well. And as we reflect and we pay tribute and honor to such a great, I would say, a hero to Trinidad and Tobago, there are qualities and characteristics of him. If you may share with us, just briefly, some that stood out to you, or a story that stood out to you in the early times of Mr. Pandey?
Mr. Pandey is truly a singular, extraordinary human being. Having come from a very poor family, he understood the power of education. Having worked in the cane fields, he made it to secondary school, and that is the Presentation College in San Fernando. But even when he won the scholarship, there was no money for traveling daily, and came a family that offered him a place to stay, and I suspect distance to walk to school. And during the vacation period, of course, you know, the schools are 39 weeks per year. So the remaining weeks, he has to be home. And during that period at home, wasn't to play, but to work. So he continued working the garden, the cane fields, eventually became employed with the Carony Company, the way cane. And even then he understood, I have to do something different, and moved on. And when he went to England, of course he had to leave by boat, and a relative had given him £100, that's the money he had. When he got to the United Kingdom, it was difficult, so he had to start working to earn upkeep money. And part of that work was as a laborer, and later on as an electrician assistant. But he made it to school, made it to university, and he did very well at university and won himself a scholarship to do his PhD at Delhi University. Of course, he came home to obtain his parents' blessings and see his family. And during that period, he met others, Stephen Maharaj being the most impressive of the lot, who told him, we need you here. And that was his involvement and engagement in the representing workers, which he did until his calling to heaven.
You know, hearing this, and I think it will stand out to all of us, is how illustrious and productive but focused. And just you sharing that with us, you could tell that he was a focused individual, very focused and productive. And when we reflect on his political life as well, we saw the same with the vision and focus that he had for country.
Mr. Pandey was perhaps one of the most disciplined human beings. He woke up at the same time on mornings to get to work. He attended everything that was required of him. Mr. Pandey was hardly ever late for a function, and he would have done several. He understood the importance of discipline, and he understood the effort people made to receive him as well. So if he had to address a meeting or function, he saw it as his duty. Even if it was a function that may have been an entertainment one, he still saw duty first, entertainment after. And he instilled that in all his members of parliament as well. Of course, I was an early supporter. I was abroad, and I started the party groups in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, and several other places. And when the party had its conference at Shagaramas, I was the only overseas delegate. So Mr. Pandey understood those who work in the party had a role to play. And of course, I was nominated in 1991, and that was the first time the UNC was participating in an election as the United National Congress. Of course, prior to that, I joined with the NAR then, and then Mr. Prime Minister Robinson then fired Mr. Pandey when he's performing his duty in Cedras. And then other MPs left. So then we had 12 MPs. So in 1991, we would have gone in with our 12 MPs to contest this election and other candidates. And the only seat we won was Fyzabad, the only new seat. And that was in 1991. And that seat was won with a margin of 152 votes. What was very interesting and perhaps instructive is that in December, the elections were held in December of 1991. So around that same time, orientation was held at the Hilton Hotel for all members of Parliament. So of course we had to attend there. And it was during the lunch break, Mr. Pandey asked me, how did I come? So I indicated to him I drove. And he said, I'll take a lift with you back to South. I said, okay, Chief. We called him Chief. We all called him Chief. Out of love and affection and respect too. And so during the tea break, I was concerned.
Why?
Because I had an old Kingswood that had no air condition. So I went to Mr. Pandey and I said, Chief, the car's no air condition. And he said to me, I thought you was going to say it has no seats. And of course he came down with me from Hilton Hotel to his house in Palmies. But of course coming down, almost as I left Hilton and drove down the hill, I'm a new member of Parliament. I'm here with the Chief. I'm a young man. I was 32 years old. And I'm thinking, well, I have to engage Mr. Pandey in conversation.
Yeah, what you
I
gonna
don't
say?
want him to feel I'm a boo-boo. So anyway, I said to him, Chief, what advice do you have for a new member of Parliament? Mr. Pandey was a student of comparative religion. He went to Presbyterian school. He was involved in all kinds of activities. He had family who were Muslims, Hindus, Christians. So he participated in everything. And my question was, what should I do? And he said to me, you're Hindu? I said, yes, Chief. He said, you read the Gita. He was a fan of the Bhagavad Gita. So I said, yes, Chief. So now I'm feeling comfortable. He's asking me something that I am familiar with, conversant. So I started to tell him everything, but he asked me, what does the Gita say? So I am trying to kill time and engage him as well. Of course, when we almost got near to San Fernando, he said, everything he says is okay, it's good. But the Gita talks of one thing, to do your duty. And that stayed with me. And that stayed with a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago. To do your duty. So one minute you're a child, that same child is a parent, that same child is a worker, that same child has a duty, maybe 25 different things. And he went on to explain, he said, you know, if someone comes to your office as a member of Parliament, and they ask for help with a street lamp, they're not too interested in really obtaining the street lamp. No. What they're interested in is your effort. And your duty is that when they leave your office, they must see the lamp lighting. The hope that you're going to make that effort. And that is very instructive for every one of us. Of course, during the 91 to about 94, 93, members of Parliament did not have offices. They had no help from the state in executing their duty. So of course, I inquired, well, how do you meet people and so? How do you treat with people? How do they find you? So you just drive around with your car glass down. If they want to see you, they'll wave or stop you. So I'm thinking, well, if you drive Fyzabad Main Road and somebody wants to see you in Akbar Trace, what will happen? So I went on to rent an office. And then I went and occupied a government building, which is still the MP's office in Fyzabad. And Mr. Pandey thought that was another thing. By which time we negotiated with the government to make sure offices became available. So members of Parliament got offices only when Mr. Pandey intervened. And from then, all MPs have offices, all 41 of us. And they also have sub-offices and they also have staff. In 91, that early period, no office, no electricity bill was paid. Of course, no phones. Cell phones came in sometime late 91 or 92. So Mr. Pandey has been very instructive. Of course, he went on to encourage children to obtain an education. And the dreaded common entrance was abolished. and every child obtained a space in a school. And that continues to this day. Later on, he introduced the dollar for dollar education, so that poor families across the board who could not obtain monies for university now had an opportunity. And several training programs, he understood the power of training people. And that went on for years and continued. So that the country has benefited tremendously from Mr. Pandey. Prior to that, persons of East Indian origin in particular were not in the cabinet. There were no Hindus then under Dr. Eric Williams' time. It's only when Mr. Pandey came as a minister, having joined the coming together with Mr. Robertson and others, that continued. And going further, Mr. Pandey was such an excellent Prime Minister. He's the only single party leader to beat the PNM. Prior to that, in '86 is when everybody came together, and 2010.
What I appreciate with Mr. Pandey, as a younger person, I grew up hearing about him, right? I wasn't old enough to understand what was going on as 5 or 6 years old. But what I liked was his vision for a national party.
Correct.
And I must compare it to what we have now in Trinidad and Tobago. And Shanta, we discussed the relationship between the PNM and the UNC back in those days.
Yeah.
And we saw that there was this the parliament was productive.
Very much so.
And it comes back to what you are telling us about him, it was about performing duty.
In fact, the name the United National Congress emerged from Africa and India.
Yeah.
The two major political parties there. And as you correctly identified, Mr. Pandey's dream, and that dream continues, is to unite Trinidad and Tobago. He understood the power of unity. And everything he did was around that. Mr. Pandey had appointed a sugar cane worker. And this is not an office worker. Dora Bridge Mohan was her name. And she was a cane cutter to the Senate. Mm-hmm. And of course, people would be saying to him, she can't talk and she doesn't come for education. And so he said, that's not our duty. Our duty is the parliament belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and all must be represented. And went on to make sure that obtaining the selection of candidates at the elections. So that you always had a very good mix.
Yeah.
And you had a youthful mix and an elderly mix. He understood the power. When Mr. Pandey was Prime Minister, one of the responsibilities is state boards. So persons from the National Committee will serve on state boards, and it was the widest cross-section of people of Trinidad and Tobago. And all three of you may be too young, but if you remember Mr. Pandey's cabinet, the Minister of Finance was Brian Whiteung. And oil was $9 a barrel and ran the country. And you had that kind of mix across the board. We call persons who acted as Prime Minister. You'd have had Dr. Daphne Phillips. You would have had Mr. Gillette and others. So there was always reflecting Trinidad and Tobago in its potpourri.
Mr. Pandey is always admired for his resilience. Can you shed some light on this source of resilience? Where did it come from?
It came from coming out of the sugar fields. That struggle, he understood struggle, he understood poverty, and he understood to be part of the National Committee and to motivate people. You need to have that quality. And he demonstrated. Mr. Pandey went to prison, if you remember. Mr. Pandey was part of the Bloody Tuesday, where they were arresting people. Several charges were laid on Mr. Pandey, and the courts have ruled in his favor to show that he was attacked. It was a concerted effort, but he stood strong and he encouraged people, and during that period he continued to serve. And it was never about Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey was always about the people. So that's what makes him so attractive, so likable, so lovable. He was a father figure to many. There's a girl who put something on Facebook. I think her name is Mira Edwards. And she has a master's degree in something. And she said all her school books from early was bought by the Pandays. Nobody knew this, and Mr. Pandey did that several times. Mr. Pandey, even when he ceased to be in active politics, had an office at RNZ. And that office, the only purpose of it was to assist people. Had no other purpose. And assist people meant financial as well. And that money would be coming from his pension. So there would never be another Pandey in this country. There would never be another Pandey in the Caribbean. I traveled with Mr. Pandey to several places throughout the Caribbean, Guyana, Canada, USA, England. It was loved. Of course, when we would have gone to different places, like in New York, we meet persons from the Caribbean representing all the ethnic groups. It was just simply loved and hugged. I think Mr. Pandey might be the most photographed person in this part of the world. Simply meaning, everywhere he went, somebody wanted a photograph with him. Prestige Fete, of which Mr. Pandey is a former student of Presentation College, said the busiest item on there, people would line up for photographs with Mr. Pandey. And Mr. Pandey would go to a fete and be very simple, humble, in Port Spain and San Fernando. Not many times, just to go there.
That is right, because when we look at, again, what in Trinidad and Tobago right now, we hear a lot about different political parties existing in specific geographical locations only in the country. And I like that point that you make about he was really able to be able to exist in Port of Spain and those areas and loved.
Very much so.
You know, even when last we would have seen him at fetes before the pandemic, the way that he was loved by soca artists, the patrons there.
And he would be the star of the show.
He was the star of the show.
Yeah.
He would, at some point, he gets on the stage. And not because he wants to,
No.
because we want him to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you observe that, and that is absolutely correct. But Mr. Pandey was loved just as much in the Yachinas in Trinidad and Tobago, in the masjids wherever he went. So that cross appeal. And I think what it may be is that more and more people wanted to be like Pandey. More and more people want the children to be like Mr. Pandey, to be simple, sincere, willing to help.
You know what, as you speak about the admiration people had for him and still have for him, I recall growing up, you go by your aunts and your uncles, and Pandey would be, so you'd see the family portraits on the wall, you see Pandey. You see Pandey on the wall,
In addition to seeing it on the wall, I have been to several homes across the country because I have campaigned in the entire Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Pandey's photo would have been in the prayer rooms of families.
Yes.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Not just Hindu families.
Absolutely.
Across the board. I've gone to more than one Baptist church where Mr. Pandey, photograph is there, of course, Mr. Pandey declared the Baptist holiday.
Yes.
And to get to there was a committee of the parliament, of which I was a member. And we were in opposition. So the PNM government, majority of members on those committees would be members of the government. And they objected to the holiday. And we had to write a minority report supporting to have the holiday declared, 30th of March. And so as soon as the Pandey won the election, that was one of the first things he did. And that's why it shows he understood the importance that the Baptist committee under pressure for several years, and he needed to be part of it. And that's how he was, making lands available for the Baptist Committee as an example, and funds as well.
Yeah.
And the PAN committee, the National Steel Ban, the first allotment of lands, 25 acres, was granted by Mr. Pandey, government of course. So he understood that Trinidad and Tobago is a potpourri, a mix of all of us, and we need each other to survive. We need each other to make sure. You always hear constituencies complaining of not much happening in their area, or they're being discriminated against. Whether it's a water supply, the supply of street lamps or what have you, Mr. Pandey made sure, and he sat as the chairman of the cabinet, the prime minister, that when proposals came, it reflected Trinidad and Tobago, so that you saw that development across the board. So if you were, as a minister, doing a project in Barapur, in Fyzabad, there'd be an equal number of projects in the north, in Laventille, in Belmont, and where have you. So Trinidad and Tobago has really learned a lot from Mr. Pandey, and I think they want to return to that.
We do.
There's a fear in the country of where we're going, what's happening.
Do you think the politics, leadership, even the governance, has it been slowly depleting since that reign of Mr. Pandey?
There would be an attempt, but the work of a good person that has added value to people's life cannot be changed. We may attempt to slow it down. We may attempt to not give it the power it requires. But Mr. Pandey's appeal that has touched the lives of so many people in terms of let's work together. Self-help. The number of projects that was done under self-help across the board in Trinidad and Tobago. That's basically where a committee comes together and the government would assist with the financial resources, and the committee would provide the labor for a water project or electricity project. That happened in both under Mr. Pandey. And remember, monies were in low availability. But
$9
Mr.
a pound.
Pandey was an economist by training as well. And you had to make sure you bring value for money. So even at the political office at the UNC head office, I was the treasurer of the party. And of course the checks would be signed by both Mr. Pandey and myself. And I remember I had to sit with him and show him the bills before he would sign the check. And he would question, why are we spending this money for this? Why are we buying so much? Did you look around? I started to get 3 quotes. And it's at the party level. In government, it was 10 times more difficult. You could not go and say, well, we're going to have a function and the entertainment might be X amount. Why? This is the people's money. So wastage did not obtain. That's why so much work was able to do with so little money. People understood. And contractors understood that as well. So that variations couldn't come in there as much as they do after Mr. Pandey ceased to be Prime Minister.
Mr. Pandey's contribution to the landscape of Trinidad and Tobago is undeniable. And I've read his book, Man in the Middle, countless times, and to say that he is a powerful orator is an understatement. I've never read speeches with this kind of quality. And, you know, having read it, because I wanted to learn the history of our country, I wanted to understand the struggles in which he faced and how he overcame them. And it's not a normal struggle. He was most definitely not a normal individual. I do think that he played such a incredible role in shaping the entire landscape of the country, the future of this country. And we here today have things that we would not have had it not been for him. And that's a statement a lot of people don't like to make. And we must acknowledge it.
Really very observant and correct.
Yeah.
In life he was like that, and in death he was like that. Michaela Pandey made the point. She said, while he's our daddy and our father, and my mom's husband, he belongs to the people.
Yeah.
And she, together with the family, made sure that the viewing, both in Port Spain and San Fernando, to make sure people could understand that at the cremation grounds. Of course, I'm referred to as a WWF champion, weddings, wakes, and funerals. And so I've been to the creek maybe 100,000 times, I don't know. It was the biggest funeral.
Yeah.
The cars were parked, and several persons made the compound available, twin walls, so we had cars parked there. Opposite the cremation, there's a number of business places there, the Anand supermarket, the canned poultries, and others, and they all made the compound available. And there were volunteers with shutters. And on the creek itself, every spot, and from the old cremation site, come right back. There were cars parked to be part of Mr. Pandey's funeral.
In this book that I've read countless times, Man in the Middle, he makes mention of this term parasitic oligarchy.
Yes.
What do you think was his take on this phenomenon?
Well, that is absolutely correct and continues today,
Yeah.
which Mr. Pandey really sincerely tried to change. For instance, when I had to buy my first car more than 40 years ago, if you had to buy a new car, you couldn't afford it. If you had to buy a new car, you had to give a bribe. And there were not many used cars available. Mr. Pandey introduced the foreign used cars. That created an entire industry. It also meant that nearly every single family could now afford a motor car. And the Caribbean islands started to come here to buy parts and cars as well. So he understood the importance of that. He understood the importance of making sure monies were available, and there was a very successful businessman, Robert Amar, who was made chairman of Small Business Development Company, and that company was created for the sole purpose of assisting people to monies and other resources to open businesses. So Mr. Pandey wanted to make sure that the pie got bigger and there were more players, and maintain that right through. And of course, it didn't stop there. In the early days, I remember we were importing close to $100 million in chicken feed, poultry feed.
Yeah.
I suspect some of you may have gone to the dairy community. And Mr. Pandey caused corn seeds to come from Mexico to be planted here to reduce that importation bill. We were importing vegetables at one time from Florida and elsewhere, and Mr. Pandey encouraged the farmers to go back and made resources available to them. Land, subsidies, several layers of subsidy. The entire Aranguez community that remained to the farming obtained a lot of assistance and farmers across the board, which also led to more markets and adding value to products. So, long time you will not see pepper sauce being sold in the supermarkets, because under Mr. Pandey's move, that kind of item started to get into the supermarket, which became an industry for a lot of items, including red mangoes and anchar and sugar cake and mithai or what have you. So Mr. Pandey understood the importance of engaging people, making sure they feel empowered, giving them the resources. It was not just the financial assistance, it was also opportunities to incorporate your company, so that you become part of it. Self-employed persons would find it difficult to obtain a visa because they didn't have a declared source of income. Some of them couldn't even open a bank account. So of course you can go to any of the embassies to obtain a visa. Mr. Pandey slowly changed that by encouraging people to, when you open a business, with a small business account, file your taxes. You may or may not have to pay huge amounts of money, but it became part of it. And that identity led to several small businesses, which have emerged into big businesses now.
Now, You touched on some of the accomplishments of the Pandey-led governments, but of course there would have been challenges. And how did he overcome it during that time? If you could name one challenge and how he would have overcome that.
Well, I mean, a very obvious challenge is Mr. Pandey was instrumental in a change of government in 1986, having lent his support. And Mr. Pandey always had the larger numbers and seats as well, constituencies. But of course, the then Prime Minister fired him. But he didn't take it badly. He went on to form the United National Congress and won government. And in the later days, Mr. Pandey was very close to Mr. Robinson and assisted him. I remember at a function, Mr. Pandey, Mr. Robinson had difficulty walking. He used a stick then. When he sat in the car, he had difficulty raising his leg to put into the car. Mr. Pandey bent down and raised his leg and put him in the car. So he understood his duty. His duty was to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And those who may have attempted to distract him, he ignored them and went on to his duty. Mr. Pandey had health challenges. But even when he was abroad for medical, we'd be inquiring how things are going. We'd call ministers. When you sat with Mr. Pandey in a meeting, Mr. Pandey always had a small pencil, a small piece of paper, and we'd write down everything he needed to inquire, member by member. And that's how his brain operated. He had a 24-hour active brain. He came with some brilliant ideas. He didn't allow, the challenges made him stronger. Challenges told him, I need to revisit this, find a better way to do it, find a way. He was focused on obtaining solutions. He knew it had to be done. People couldn't wait. People needed water. People needed to send their children to school. It was unfair that you didn't have enough places at the secondary schools. That's not the fault of the child. Mr. Pandey corrected it by building more schools. So under his watch, most amount of schools was built and continued. He made more resources available to other bodies. So today you have several bodies that own schools in the country. Some new, very new ones. And that's the goodness of his heart.
You know, Mr. Pandey was known for treating his political opponents as colleagues. Do you think that behavior, that style of leadership is still present currently?
A lot less is there. Mr. Pandey understood we both have work to do, meaning the government and the opposition. And he was focused on getting the work done, but he understood that it's a collective effort. And he would have served under Dr. Eric Williams, he would have served under George Chambers, and of course Patrick Manning on 2 occasions. And so he understood, listen, you have your work to do, I have my work to do. My job in the parliament is to oppose you if you're not doing it right. Also, my bigger job is to replace you. And he did what he had to do to achieve both. So he opposed when he needed to. He was a master debater. Mr. Pandey had a huge retention. Of course, on the opposite side, meaning on the government side, there'd be more members than the opposition. That's why they're in government. And he remembered what each member said if each one spoke. And sometimes I would be sitting there and other MPs and be shocked how Mr. Pandey was able to respond. And he had the nicest way of saying the most dreaded thing. So others, if he said, well, the member for X, who might be minister of something, said something, that minister most times will be worried, what is he going to say? How is he going to attack me? Can I survive this? It was full of love. When we went in the tea room, we sat together, all members of parliament, but members of the government, when we were in opposition that is, would always come to his table. And when he was in government, the same. In fact, at the last opening of Parliament, after the last election, which should be 2020, almost every single member of the government took a photograph of Mr. Pandey. It's only out of love and respect, nothing else.
You know, when you speak about this and we reflect on, I wish, I know we can never have someone like Mr. Pandey, but I wish we could have politics like that. Because what we have right now is a bit unhealthy for the country.
Well, your wish may come true. Mr. Pandey is a brand. He has a daughter, Michaela. Michaela has been a member of parliament. She's now a political leader of a political party. And she spent her entire life under the watch of her father. So she has learned a lot. And she has a huge role to play in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. And she's also young. And politically she's attractive. So that there's that opportunity where people who want to identify would now have an avenue. So that Mr. Pandey may have gone another place. There's another Pandey emerging.
We really want to thank you for sitting with us here and discussing such a, I don't know how we can navigate a topic like this in one show and pay honor and tribute, but I think you performing a very good duty here, very, very good duty, and we really want to thank you for joining us and sharing with us some of your experiences, lived experiences with Mr. Pandey.
I too want to thank you all. If Mr. Pandey was watching this, he'd be very proud of three of you. Mr. Pandey would be saying, I have done my duty. Here are three young people who are interested in the politics, who are interested in Trinidad and Tobago. You're independent, you have your own professions, but you understand the bigger role. And the fact that you have invited me to reflect on Mr. Pandey means that you understand, like the majority of Trinidad and Tobago, that Mr. Pandey is our hero.
Absolutely.
And the young lady reading his book, you're singular in that. Of course, more people are now looking for his books and his essays and his political speeches. But if you read more of Mr. Pandey, you'll become a better human being. You'll have a wider understanding of people. You'll learn to negotiate. You'll learn to how to use words, how to communicate with people, how to reach out to people, which is important because living every day requires you to communicate. And you must become attractive communicating. People must see simplicity and sincerity in what you do. And that's Mr. Pandey's teachings. Do your duty.
Do your duty. So we'll be back with more. Stay with us. Welcome back to Critical Conversations. Thank you for staying with us and joining us. And we'd also like to thank everyone on the Sankhya Television Network. I know we have some new viewers there, and of course on our Facebook platform. You know, if you have anything that you want to share with us, comment below. You can message us we're on all social media platforms from Instagram to Facebook and TikTok. So you can find us at the Compass Foundation TT, and let's have a critical conversation. I know before we end, I again want to say to the Pandey family, please accept the countries on behalf of the country and on behalf of the Compass Foundation. Please accept our sympathy and condolences. And we have lost someone, but the outpouring love and support that he has gotten, I know that he felt it where he is. And thank you for joining us again on this critical conversation.
Thank you.